Shaston M76 coming to you live from Guadalajara. How y'all doing today? Well, I guess more specifically, I'm coming from Tonalá. This is in a periférico just leaving Tonalá. And I'm going to this little small ranch town called Matatlán through Urvi. And I took a couple of days to record this. I went part of the way the first day just to kind of check it out, and then and record part of it, and then I recorded the other part. Then I actually did the whole trek the second day, but and it was a trek, let me tell you. I'm going to start off by saying you do not want to miss the second part of this video. I mean, I am telling you, you do not want to miss it. You will kick yourself literally if you do miss this second part of the video. There was something that I saw that really shocked me, that really surprised me. I'm not going to give it away. You have to wait and watch the video. Also, I'm kind of like doing a lot of different things right now. I'm playing some of my own music on my videos and stuff, and I'm hoping you'll enjoy it. The other thing that I'm going to say is you really have to watch both videos as well, just to kind of get a sense of how far this trek was that I did in one day both ways. And so it's like 20-25 miles each way. I don't know exactly how far. I didn't calculate it, but it's a long ways, and I have to go down this huge valley, you know, and everything, and got to go back up that huge valley, and it's a trek. And we made it there. We made it there in about 2 hours, and then it took about 3 or 3.5 hours to come back. And that was because it was a trek. You will see real soon. This is just like unbelievable. This was probably the hardest trip I ever made. And the other thing is that I had my bicycle a little out of position for me, and so it kind of hurt my back a little bit, and just made for kind of an interesting trip, really. It wasn't easy. And so I didn't take this into consideration when I prepared for this trip, but it was a doozy. And I also got to add that that day it got up to about 100 degrees. And in the morning it wasn't too bad. It was probably in the upper 70s, but towards about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 2-3 in the afternoon, it was a full 100 degrees out. And so it was really warm, to say the least. You can see it right now. I mean, just really good weather for this type of thing. And so we always check out, deals that we can get at pawn shops, um, or small stores, craft stores, tianguis, wherever. We, especially cycling stores, bicycle stores. Me and my brother-in-law, we hunt for freestyle bike parts and stuff that we resell on the internet. And my brother-in-law makes a pretty good living at it, so we get pretty lucky quite a bit. So anyway, we're on our way to El Urbi, and we'll be there momentarily. You'll see when we start going downhill again. That is El Urbi, and that is pretty close to El Basurero, the dump. When we pass a dump, you'll see what I'm talking about. But anyway, cheers, enjoy. I hope you really enjoy this video. And like I said, you really, I can't emphasize this enough, you really have to watch the second part. So now I'm going to, in a little while, when I get back up on the other side of this of the hill going to Matatlan, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I wound up in Mexico. So stay tuned. Gracias.
a la subida.
No, eso sí, pero...
No, digo que apenas vamos bajando y luego subir allá.
Ajá, no, sí sé. Y ni siquiera... Híjole, ni... Yo estaba pensando que estábamos casi como a la mitad allá en el basurero. No manches. Sí. Vamos.
Nada más que tienes que venir aquí a la orilla.
Sí, estoy bien. Sí. Ay. Caray. Ah. No, tengo calambres. Ay.
No te pares, güey, no te van a dar bien gacho, güey, los calambres.
Sí.
Dile que si querías plátano.
No, yo iba a comprar ahí, pero... Ay, déjame agarrar mi suero. Ay, ese sí sería buen lugar para tomar. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story of how I got here. So some people don't really know much about my story, but when I was 17, I was a little bit of an out-of-control kid. I was way out of control in many ways. And I think more than anything, I was just really hurt in life. And so I became a Christian. When I look back on it, I see that there were a lot of people that were praying for me. There's a lot of people who were telling me about Christ. And eventually I went to church, and I was really surprised, and it seemed like something I wanted to be a part of. And I met this guy who is an ex-Mormon. He would talk to people. He had a lot of Mormon friends, for instance, and he would always try to convince them that Christ was the way. And I didn't know much about him, but he would take me around on his jobs. He was just like 4 years older than me, but he already had his own drywall company. And I was like, man, you got it made, you know. And he was kind of a big guy, you know. Here I am, you know. I stand at about, I don't know, probably 5'7". He's like 6'3", 6'4", and he was the linebacker, you know, kind of a frame. And he was such a nice guy, though. I mean, he really was. And he would tell me all about Mexico. And he just told me that, you know, he went on a 6-month trip to Mexico for Mormon missions. He was a missionary. And what he didn't tell me is that his whole family lives in Mexico. And it's kind of funny because in northern Chihuahua, you have Mitt Romney's family. That's a big Mormon community. And then you have the LeBarons. And I didn't know that my friend was a LeBaron. I had no idea. In fact, so I didn't know this until I met his oldest brother. And his oldest brother carries the last name LeBaron. And I met him in Salt Lake City. He just came up and started talking to me. And I noticed that his Spanish was better than his younger brother's. His Spanish was like mine. You know, it was pretty impeccable. And so he was fluent in Spanish. And he was telling me about this story. And it was kind of interesting. He was telling me about this story about how one of his... that one of the kids in that community had gotten kidnapped. And I hadn't heard anything about it, but it just so didn't ring true. It was like so foreign that I just kind of thought that either he was making it up or that he heard something wrong, or I don't know. I just kind of thought, well, yeah, I hadn't heard anything about it. I just kind of forgot all about it. And then many years later, I saw this documentary on the LeBarons on YouTube. And I realized that he was telling me the same story where this kid got kidnapped. And he got kidnapped. And so they went to the local government. And they said, hey, you got to get our kid back. And these drug dealers were holding this kid for $1 million ransom. And they ended up having to return that kid for no money. I mean, they literally paid no money to get that kid back. It was a miracle. Really, I mean, if you know about kidnappings here in Mexico, you know that that does not happen. So there's that happened, and and so he got back, and then a couple weeks later, there was two men in that community that got murdered by that same drug dealer, and finally the government had enough of him and went and grabbed him and turned him into the DEA. And that community was kind of interesting. But anyway, so it was all, I didn't know at the time, I didn't know any of this. I didn't know like what my friend knew about Mexico, but he kind of opened my mind to the Mexican culture in a way that kind of attracted me to it. I remember like one time, for instance, my friend told me about how his brother, one of his brothers or his cousins or something, was marrying a 15-year-old girl. And I said, 15-year-old girl isn't ready to be married. What's wrong with you? And I pretty much said something like that. And he said, normally I would agree with you, but women in Mexico, they're ready to have a family when they're 15 sometimes, especially in smaller communities. And that really surprised me. And that really messes with the Western narrative a little bit. And so when I was like, wow, that's really different. Okay, so what else is different, And it wasn't that the fact that 15-year-old girls could get married, that wasn't what attracted me. It was just that there was something so different. There was something about the narrative I was being told in the United States, being from the United States, that wasn't true for everyone. And that's what I wanted to find out more about. And I think that's pretty much why why my mind was being opened. And so then later, a couple of years later, when I was in Job Corps, my best friend was an ex-gang leader in one of the towns or a city in Washington State, and he had become a Christian. And he took me to the Spanish Assembly, and that's where I started learning Spanish. And you couldn't help but learn Spanish because everything was bilingual. And, they would sing their worship songs in Spanish, and I would see them on the overhead. And sometimes, then they would sing them in English, and I could put certain verbs together and certain words together, and I could, learn a little bit. And I learned how to pronounce and read Spanish within about 3 weeks. It wasn't hard. I could probably read Spanish about 80% after about 3 weeks. Now, I didn't understand any of it, but I could read it. I could pronounce the words as they were, I could pronounce the word 80% of the words correctly. And that's, I would get the double L, the Enya, I would get all of that, within 3 weeks. The only thing I wouldn't get is the accentuation, which I still struggled with to this day. So anyway, that's kind of my story of how I got here. I'll tell the rest of the story in the next video on my return trip. I hope you guys will stay tuned for that. And like I said, you really, really do not want to miss it. So, take care.
Thank you.